Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I speak with Visser, North American GM at Sana Commerce. Sana recently released a new report measuring B2B business attitudes around e-commerce and digital transformation. Among the findings was the importance of customer experience in B2B. We discuss findings from the report and the broader outlook for e-commerce in the Dynamics ERP channel, including trends around integration, industry differences, and the challenges of B2B versus B2C e-commerce. Okay, well, Visser, welcome to the MSDW Podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
No problem, Jason. Happy to be here.
So I thought this was a good opportunity to have a chance to have you on and learn a little more about some of the e-commerce trends that are impacting a lot of our readers who are either running a Dynamics ERP or CRM solution, or are probably talking to clients who have that as one of the needs on their mind these days. And, the space continues to evolve and change. And one of the reasons that we thought this was a good time to have you on was because your company, Sana Commerce, has just released a new report with some data and findings on B2B e-commerce in particular. So I thought that would be a sort of a great starting point. So maybe before I go too much farther, why don't I give you a chance to maybe just tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your role at Sana.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, thanks for having us. As you mentioned, my name is Visser. I am the general manager for Sana Commerce in North America. As my name and my accent probably reveal, I'm not originally from the States, but I've been here for 4 years. Before that, I worked for 2 years outside of the Netherlands for Sana Commerce on the US market. We've seen things changing a lot. Our product was really started almost out of a frustration of constant synchronization of data between the Dynamics platforms and web stores. We thought that could be done smarter and better. So that's how we started the product Sana Commerce. It's an e-commerce solution that as the main unique differentiator is that it's absolutely real-time integrated with Dynamics. So all the advantages of the flexibility of Dynamics are available for the web store as well. One single source of truth. And we've been developing the product over the years. We've been entering this market, and we saw a lot of things happening, and basically this year we said we make a lot of assumptions and based on our experience, but let's see if those assumptions are true and valid and what is important for our clients and prospects. And so we asked a research company to conduct a research amongst manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, really 3 core areas where the Dynamics products are very strongly represented. And very excited about the report and the takeaways that came out of it. It confirmed a lot of things that we saw happening. It's a good refresher, but it also brought new insights. And happy to talk a little bit more about that and share some of those.
So a couple of things I just wanted to maybe start with, and you touched on this, but the idea of sort of single source of the truth for e-commerce connected to an ERP. The differentiator there, or that maybe the distinction to make, is that there's sort of standalone web stores that can be interfaced with a financial or an ERP system, and there can be sort of an integration point where the data where that manages sort of data being sent between systems, and then there's a solution like what you're talking about, which would be where transactional information is a lot more, I guess, organic, or it's really kind of all part of the same transactional flow.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. And then there's quite some inflation on the term integration. All kinds of solutions.
Too generous of a term.
Yeah. Well. I mean, it's almost a conversation between people, like how pure do you take take the term integration. And are your eyes and ears open to double check suppliers on whether they mean integration or interfacing? Because like you say, there is a difference. In our opinion, integration means the data comes from the Dynamics real time. I do know that others say, well, we take it from Dynamics, but we store it in a database on the web server, and then we use it from there. And I'm not saying one way is better than the other. It really depends on the situation that the prospect is in, but it should be a clear definition of the term there.
Yeah, I thought that was just an important sort of distinction to make, because I think that is one of the things that you'll see a lot of variation on in different types of solutions that someone might be evaluating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, e-commerce overall is certainly an area that's, it goes back quite a ways at this point. I was actually just thinking as we were getting ready to start here that I, in my IT consulting days, worked on some projects. I wasn't an employee there, but I worked on some projects that used open market. I don't know how far back your e-commerce experience goes, but that was one of I think the first generation of sort of e-commerce solutions out there, and it was a real bear. They sort of blasted off in the first internet bubble, and then crashed and disappeared. But yeah, so it goes way back. I mean, that was like the late 90s, early 2000s, right? But so with that sort of history in mind, is there sort of would you say we're in a certain era in terms of where e-commerce is today overall, or is it just a real mix? So where do you see things, or is that where you position it?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about what do you mean with a particular term, what is e-commerce? Of course, there's so many different ways to describe it, and everybody has their own interpretation. But if you go to the core, selling products online, you could even argue that EDI is a form of e-commerce, of course. So it's how we see it is it's a web store where people can create an account or be a guest and go through an order process and place an order, and that results in a sales order for a company that they then fulfill, and then payment and those kind of things all are either part of it or follow based on that. It goes way back. We all know Amazon. We all use Amazon, but I think I recently saw a photo of Jeff Bezos in '95. It may even be one of those famous internet memes that in '95 he looked a little like a nerdy librarian saying, "I sell books," and then fast forward to 2017. He looks different himself. He's a lot fitter, and now he's like, I buy and sell everything that's out there. To like the jokes of Alexa, buy Whole Foods, it's come a long way. Technology has come a long way. It's being in the right place at the right moment with the right product, and I feel we're in a similar position. The way how we integrate and the way how we real time get this information, we may have not been so far as we are right now if we started it 2-3 years earlier than we did, because at that point the customers and the technology was not ready for it. When I started on the US market, only recently desktop sharing tools were there, so I could even demonstrate how our product works to US prospects and partners. And I'm not even that long active on this market, so we tend to forget where we come from pretty quickly and are very future oriented, which is great, of course. But it's e-commerce has been around, and it calls for innovations constantly, and we really see with our product a good fit with companies that especially business to business, where very often the complexity of the business logic prevents them from going online before or cause a lot of difficulties with their first experiences. So we see hesitation with our prospects. And very often, once we can actually demonstrate it to them with a proof of concept, with actually get going, a lot of those hesitations are taken away because, we show that we use the flexibility that Dynamics has for web purposes. And all of a sudden, they can take orders online, where very often the hesitation is, well, our customers don't place orders online, or it doesn't work for our products. Our pricing logic is too complex. There's a lot of reasons not to, but truth of the matter is that there is a digital transformation happening, and companies need to come up with a strategy to deal with that. And that a strategy could be, we're not going online, but then you need to do something differently, because stuck in the middle is the worst that can happen to any company. You see that in retail. Companies that in retail didn't step up their game for digital transformation, or really chose for a boutique, high service, added value in the store, those stuck in the middle, they are having a rough time.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, then it sounds like you have to at least be sort of educated on what the state of technology is, because a lot of the things you were just mentioning sound to me like, well, we knew that this was either not possible in the past or too expensive to try to implement, but they're maybe not even aware of sort of where things stand 2-3 years since they've last maybe assessed some of these possibilities. And it's an interesting point. I mean, you can make an informed decision, I guess, in a lot of different directions, but you have to know what you're measuring against.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough to know it all, of course, it's something that companies need to decide, and then put a push behind, it's not always smooth sailing. I mean, that's one of the key takeaways that we found as obstacles for digital transformation.
When I wanted to maybe get a little more of your view on sort of the split between B2B and B2C. I mean, obviously there's a lot of differences, but I mean, how divergent are they in the e-commerce space in particular? These days, is there still a big gap?
Not as big as it was, I think. And it really depends, and I have to challenge myself on that a lot too. For me, a real eye opener was about a year ago. I was talking to somebody called us and said, I need a web store, and then we go through a little bit of Q&A, like, okay, what do you need it for? What is your audience? So I asked him, are you business to business or are you business to consumer? And he was in the products for golf courses, and so he only sold to golf courses, to pros, all the accessories, that they need to teach golfing or play golf. And he's like, oh, I'm strictly B2B. I only sell to golf courses or to the pros that are giving training. And I was like, okay, but almost instinctively I asked him, okay, but what if I want some of your products to build a putting green in my backyard? Should I be able to just register and place an order, probably against list pricing, and will you deliver me the products if I give you the money for it? And he's like, oh yeah, of course. And that for me was almost an eye opener. Like, okay, he thinks he's clearly B2B, and if I just ran with that, I had a whole conversation with him about golf courses, but I missed an element that he basically is also fine in taking orders from random people or a new golf course that he doesn't know yet. So I think brand awareness and building your own business space for a lot of companies becomes more important. So you see gray areas or hybrids come up where, yes, I was a wholesaler, but yeah, I mean, anybody that wants to place an order can place an order. It's just the clients that keep coming back and place big orders get special pricing or get advantage in allocation of items, for example. And I think in that sense, the pure difference between B2B and B2C is going to somewhat disappear or merge, and it will be a lot more personalized, segmented experiences for web store and digital platforms in general, where it really depends on your history, on with the company, with the competitors. I mean, it's all big data. It's all out there. Based on that, um, uh, companies will do an educated guess on what products I want for what price, almost like plane tickets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I thought was interesting is the theme that the B2B customers still want a sort of a good customer experience, something that maybe comes closer to what consumers have come to expect.
Hmm.
Is that speak to the idea that kind of if you're in sort of if you're ordering from a vendor as a business, you're maybe just going to get a rougher or sort of a more raw experience. Today, you're more likely to kind of encounter something that's not really nicely tailored to sort of help you.
Yeah, I mean, I think from work experience and placing bulk orders, we're all used to kind of the, okay, these are the items that I always order. Just enter the
Mm-hmm.
quantity and hit submit, and then I place an order. But like you say, it's because it's the expectations are different, because when we go home from work and we place an order on Amazon to buy cat food, um, we have a certain experience, and that's driving demand to e-commerce platforms like ours, like that, of customers saying, well, but on Amazon it works this and this and this way, how can I do that in your platform? So indeed, there is, in terms of features and the way how uh, business to business e-commerce platforms work, it's heavily influenced by um, personal experiences that consumers have in their personal lives, and now also in the workplace.
Interesting. For this for the report and maybe for the business as well, industry seems to be fairly important for you. Um, I always think of whenever I think of sort of e-commerce or anything sort of about customer experience, I always think of manufacturing as one of those spaces where there's maybe a lot of room to improve. Do you see that, or are there other industries that you're sort of closely paying attention to where you think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement when it comes to web stores or just other e-commerce related capabilities?
Yeah. Well, if I want to challenge a prospect and trigger them with that, I always ask them, how complex is your business logic? And you see that in automotive. Uh, yeah, in manufacturing in general, every customer has a different price. Every product has multiple variants that they need to choose from, and yeah, pretty quickly you get into configurators, CPQ kind of tools, and yeah, we almost like that situation more than a very simple B2C case, because that's this is where we are good at. We are good in the complexer situations, because we know Dynamics is good in those complexer situations, and if not native Dynamics, there are some very good add-ons available for configurators, for CPQs,
Sure.
that can take away that complexity, can build in validations, and we just embed those in the buying process online.
So that would get back to, for example, if you had a complex um, ordering process from your customers and either I don't know engineer to order or some other sort of
Yeah.
approach, that has to all be factored in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then you get all kinds of situations. One of our clients is a big manufacturer of the pumps for gas stations. You can imagine how many variables there are to a gas station pump,
Right.
and the spare parts that they may have to order later. You want to look up a serial number and find what parts are applicable to that parent machine. Um, those types of companies, I would even say 3-4 years ago, would have a very, very hard time to go online, other than maybe with 100 spare parts that are available for all products. And now it's possible because the models exist in their ERP systems, and with a CPQ tool embedded in a web portal, anybody can place an order without making a mistake in configuring the wrong thing, because the validation happens real time. The inventory is allocated for, the price is calculated real time. So that single source of truth really becomes available not only within the walls of the company, but also outside.
When you think about Dynamics customers in particular, are you more focused on, so as a company, are you more interested in their ERP investments, or do the CRM factor into some of the solutions that you design?
It's mostly the ERP, because our everything around our product revolves around sales orders. So we create a real-time sales order in Dynamics based on the information from Dynamics and interaction with the client through a web portal. So if there's CRM and that information is also integrated with Dynamics, it works as such. We need that ERP to be in place to get all the customer specific logic, inventory information, warehouses, order history, those kind of things all available online.
Certainly makes sense. So if it's a Dynamics 365 customer, I think that those what is it? The templates Microsoft's putting forward now are sort of around, processes to support. Is it prospect to cash? I think is where they're talking. So that integration is more important than ever for someone to be putting together a really effective story that includes web stores and online purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. When you talk to Dynamics customers these days, I know we talked about sort of evolution or phases of maturity. Are there any other signals or sort of signs of maturity that tend to drive technology investment these days when you talk to companies in the dynamic space?
Well, for us, it's important. Like the fact that we're real time integrated will also, obviously, in the testing phase and in the implementation phase, will also highlight if certain information is not or incorrectly administered in the ERP. The better the ERP implementation has been done, the more aware a client is of the importance of ERP for an integrated e-commerce solution, the easier that transition is. That's different for every company. We often recommend to obviously prep for that. And the way how we approach a project for a company that's choosing or in the implementation of Dynamics versus that already has Dynamics up and running and now is ready for the next phase with a web store, that's different. We have a different flow. We have different recommendations for each of those.
One of the things I thought was interesting in the report itself was just that there were you looked at sort of different individual countries and pulled out different different findings, and we don't need to maybe jump into all of those, but I am interested. It's just if you had any perspective around sort of the domestic versus global, uh, uh, opportunities the companies are facing, and if e-commerce has a is a consideration in that. So if companies are doing more trading internationally, anything
Yeah.
around that where e-commerce
Well,
related
there's
capabilities come into play?
Yeah, there's multiple aspects there, of course. Having worked both in the European and now the American or North American, I should say, e-commerce market for Dynamics, I definitely feel that in the US there is a second and third generation of e-commerce happening. Just because of the nature of the country, it's so big, and um, yeah, companies very often already do business outside of the state, and in Europe that would automatically mean outside of the country and coming with a lot more complexity. Here that's somewhat different. So due to the distances, I feel like the US adapted e-commerce really before Europe did. In Europe, you see right now a lot of cross country, and for the US, we're already at a point like, okay, Canada, Mexico, South America, or Europe, and that is the beauty of e-commerce. Of course, you can sell to anybody anywhere. And you can find products online that you thought were not available to you, but because that tiny little specialist in the Midwest has exactly that product that you need, and you can Google for it and you'll find it and you can buy it right there in their web store. And Yeah, depending on how you set up your web store, that is globally applicable.
Okay, great. Well, I'm trying to think. Was there anything else that you took from the report that you thought was noteworthy, maybe that we didn't touch on yet?
No, it's of course, there's multiple ways how companies look at e-commerce. There's companies that say I need to sell more. There's others that say I need to sell better, and there's ones that yeah cheaper, differently. So it's ultimately a question of return on investment, and yeah, what we see is as sometimes as an interesting conversation that happens between departments within our clients is sales and marketing is obviously always very future driven, and it's like we need to sell more and more products to the same customer or different products, and IT tries to at least make sure it's stable, maintainable, and in control. And that's an interesting kind of tension between the two because um, each asks for different features. And we do see that more and more companies realize because they're into their second and third generation of e-commerce platforms that they're implementing, that maintaining two sources for business logic or two places, two locations, is difficult. It's costly. There's room for error. And it ultimately takes away off the ROI because yeah, you buy a platform to sell online, but you also have a lot more work coming with it that doesn't contribute. So that single stack um, um, requirement is becoming more and more clear, more and more apparent in the market. I feel um, ERP platforms have immense amounts of flexibility. But if you don't have that ultimately in your point of sales, in this case the web store, you're still limited by the application that you're ultimately selling through. And the single stack solution takes that hurdle away. And that companies that are in their second and third implementation of e-commerce realize that best. We found.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially just from since I tend to talk to customers that of dynamic solutions more than other vendors, but um, I think one trend that is probably a hopeful one for sort of continued or improving use of e-commerce technology in general is that there seems to be a push with the most recent releases. I mean, there's always this push, but toward more use of standardized software. I mean, you've
Yep.
always heard that from vendors and from consultants that they try to talk people out of customization, but it feels like just I can't quantify it, but it feels like partners in the dynamic space with the newest releases are even pushing harder for that. Maybe Microsoft's incentivizing it too. I think with some of the new and more standardized customization techniques,
Yep.
and maybe the policies that they're gonna around what they're gonna support or not support. So I don't know. I got to think that when it comes to if customers are going to move towards standardized capabilities, that has to put them in a better position toward
Yep.
building more robust
Yep.
connections with.
Yeah, you're more future proof,
Right.
and you make a change in one place and you see it applicable everywhere else. And I think it's also partially driven again by our personal lives, where your Android or your Apple phone comes out with an update, and you get it for free, and it rolls out, and it doesn't affect other than user interface and maybe some new features, but it doesn't affect yeah, your operations in that sense. And I think Microsoft is doing a good job in being ahead of that. There's other ERP platforms, mastodons, that have obviously a longer history, and then it becomes tougher to catch up on these kind of things. If you have an ERP system that you've been maintaining for 40 years, then it's tough to break that, and clients see that too. And I would definitely recommend everybody to stay up to date as much as possible. Try to stay standard as much as possible, because very often the way a company operates in their warehouse and in their back office, in their finance department, is because the previous time they implemented their systems, it came with limitations that are not there anymore. So keep challenging also your own processes when you select a new platform, because maybe it's time that you change instead of the platform that you pick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier said than done, of course.
It's a theme that various people have touched on. I know in articles on our site, and I've certainly read it elsewhere too. I mean, it's certainly a theme there's a lot of wisdom behind it. It's like you said, maybe not always easy to do, but it certainly can pay off in the opportunities that it opens up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, excellent. Well, Chris, I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for sort of taking us through some of these findings and talking a little bit about where e-commerce is at these days in the dynamic space.
No problem, Jason. Again, thanks for having us, and happy to answer any further questions in case they come up.
Excellent. This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Chris Visser for joining me on this episode. You can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.